Welcome to Lizzie's Bedtime Stories. This is an unusual bedtime story because I am going to be the storyteller reading from my novel If I Die Before I Wake. And I've asked Shelia Mason Powell to be my interviewer, and I'm excited to have her on the show. So thank you for taking on the mantle of being my host.
You're quite welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yay!
Hey.
So you have some questions for me?
Yes, I sure do. When did you start writing?
When I was a girl, I tried poetry because I'm dyslexic and it was hard for me to learn grammar, and you can make your own rules up in poetry. I did that when I was younger, and then I stopped. And my dyslexia made it very hard for me to learn to read or write. And I find it ironic that I'm a writer, considering how much I avoided it like the plague. About 7 or 8 years ago, I started tutoring a boy named Luciano, and he had epic writer's block, and I had to do all sorts of things to try and get him out of it, like webbings and word associations and lists and free writes, and I figured, like, if I can teach Luciano how to kind of unleash his creativity, then maybe I can write too. And I decided lesbian fiction because Radcliffe, I had one in August. I read like one of her books a day, like 30 books in a month. And I was like, well, maybe I can write too. And so that's actually around the time when I started kind of fiddling around. And about a year later, I got the idea for If I Die Before I Wake, and my best friend Jackie took me through it. And like I would write a chapter and give it to her, and she's like, and then what happens? And it went on like that for the month of not February, November, and then I finished the book.
Okay, well, why did it take you so long to put If I Die Before I Wake out there?
The original incarnation was horror, and there were a lot. There's one scene that I've taken and actually still exists in the current book, and that's towards the end. But in the original incarnation, the concept for it was that Charlie hasn't been sleeping well for 6 months. Her wife left her for a younger woman, and it's been hard for her to fall asleep. And so she starts thinking up kind of like a guilty pleasure. She doesn't feel like watching true crime, but she thinks of it like true crime stuff in her head. And so at first, she just thinks it's her ideas, but the dreams that she's having are projecting to the people who she's harming. And then eventually one night, something that she does in her dreams ends up in real life, and somebody ends up dead. And so the book progressed, and there was one act after another, and then she's trying to figure out how to reverse it and make everything stop. And then there's the mad dash for resolution with the cop who is investigating the serial murders. But I decided that it was too dark, too violent, and I didn't want my first book or the first impression of me as a writer to be that. And the other thing is, I didn't feel like Charlie was coming onto the paper the way that I felt her. And so I kept on muscling through it for a couple of years. And then in the last 6 months, I really revamped it. And in 2 months, I rewrote it completely, and just keeping that one scene and other ideas that were from there. But it's completely changed, and now I feel it's a paranormal novel rather than horror.
Well, I'm glad that you actually went that way. When you first introduced me, you just introduced me as Shelia Powell, and I don't guess that a lot of people know what I do for a living, but I am a professional psychic medium. And so people say that when you spot it, you've got it. And I have to tell you that by reading what you've written, I do spot it, and I know that you've got some gifts yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's probably what made you gravitate toward writing the paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
And so do you share any of the gifts of any of the characters in If I Die Before I Wake?
Yes. I consider myself an empath, and I think when you read paranormal fiction, you may have come across empaths before, but not quite to the extreme that Charlie has, and she's got an affinity for Faith, which is the character that's on the cover of the book. And they share really intense empathy, and that's a relationship that I've had with a friend of mine, where even even on a different coast or a different country, I can feel her anxiety or anger or pain. And I've had to kind of examine, am I having this emotion or is this her emotion? And so that did make it into the novel.
Okay, any other of the gifts that you share?
Do you know, I don't know if I consciously understand like the gifts, like to give them names like clairsentience or clairvoyance and all that kind of stuff. I just know that I'm very insightful
Mm-hmm.
and warm, and a lot of people who are very private open up to me.
Okay, that tends to come with being an empath, because I'm an empath as well. And it's funny because I know when you and I first started talking, and it hasn't really been that long ago, your grandma immediately came through to me. And she's actually sitting here very calmly. She's been with me all day. I think she's as excited about you reading a chapter in your book as you are and as I am tonight. She is absolutely just enamored with the characters and the way that you presented them, and so I'm going to let you set up the story and go ahead and begin to read,
Sure.
so that Grandma Clara can get what she wants, and
did I tell you my grandmother's name?
I don't think so.
No,
but she did.
My grandmother's name is Clara Lee.
Okay, well, she's sitting here with me very calmly, and she's very proud of you, so I'd just like to let you know that.
I'm blushing. I'm like, oh my God. I know I didn't tell. I know I referred to her as my grandmother, but not by her name. But
okay.
Aww.
Well, Grandma Clara says that she's very proud, and so she wants you to know that. Okay, so, and I have to tell you this. She says to tell you that she's proud that you're stepping out not in just one area, but 3 separate areas, and I'm not sure what she's talking. I feel like it's she says the writing, the show, but then there's another area that you're about to step out into, and I'm sorry, I promise I didn't mean to read you, but when she starts talking, I have to start too.
Okay.
So just know that there's something else coming along to go along with these other 2 things, okay?
Yeah, I've been feeling that I'm on a precipice of wonderful things happening finally, and I'm 37, and I feel like my life, like I had a great experience in college. I went to Mount Holyoke College, and it was just so wonderful to be around brilliant, motivated women, and the environment is very loving and nurturing. And I was always told that I showed great promise, and unfortunately, after I graduated, I was not showing great promise. And I tried to get into education. I got my master's, but like some things made it difficult for me to work. And so now I feel like I'm finally doing what I've meant to do and doing something that I'm proud of. And what I said to another friend is like, I feel like a Mount Holyoke woman again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This third thing, though, that's coming in is going to be the thing that ties everything together. And I do see the things that were stopping you, and I feel like those are going to the side to a point. Well, and we'll talk about all that later.
Sure.
So go ahead and set up the reading, and because Grandma Clara, she's stomping her feet, and I'm going to start.
She wants to hear. So
and she's just rocking back and forth. So I'm going to let you move along before she has a fit.
Okay. So at the start of If I Die Before I Wake, Grandma Breyer had passed, and the first scene is at a law office where the will is being read, and Charlie doesn't want to be there because she doesn't want to deal with the fact that the only ally that she had in her family is passed. And she doesn't want to be there, but she goes there, and her sister comes along, and it's like she knew her sister always gets everything, so she expected to get everything, and at the will she got nothing. And Charlie got this necklace, which is a tree of life, and like you can see it on the cover, but symbolically it is the tree with great growing branches, but also significant growing roots, and the Celtic not work is where there's no beginning and no end from the top to the bottom, and it's about, being grounded. And so she had this, and she knew it was a family heirloom. She knew that Grandma Breyer wore it every day, and so it was a treasure. She did not know that there were going to be gifts, as you might say, that come along with them, and they're the kind of gifts that she wants to return. She has a spirit child that appears to her. She has this dark spirit that is stalking her and is very embittered by something that happened in their shared past. So the chapter that I'm going to read, chapter 8, is where, Charlie kind of thinks that things have slowed down, and like her paranormal experiences with Cole and with the spirit child seem to be behind her, and then we have what happens. And so I'm going to start the reading. Charlie returned to her classroom and closed the door with a whoosh, then leaned against it. She blew wisps that had come loose during the day, but they were too fond of tickling her cheeks. The room didn't look too bad, only scraps of paper on the floor here and there, but the desks were aligned properly with each chair tucked in. Happily, the reading, listening, and math centers were neat as a pin. Gabriel Sayers organized that part of the cleanup, and for some reason the other kids didn't mind doing their chores if he was at the helm. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply for the first time that day. The door shuddered, then disintegrated. She stumbled backwards. The room she landed in was dark and sinister. The silence so complete it made her ears ring. Dark shapes appeared to be furniture, but she couldn't discern their true shape or purpose. A fire roared to life in the deep inset fireplace at the far end of the room. It was like the one she had seen in Colonial Williamsburg, only much larger. The heat was so intense she started to sweat. Beads of perspiration trickling down her neck and then between her breasts, making her skin itch. This can't be real. Maybe, maybe not. A deep voice. Cruel, deep voice taunted. Charlie whipped her head around, searching for the owner of that dark voice. She had a feeling this was her new best friend. Cole? Oh, darling, I'm touched that you remember my name. I thought all of your memories were shot. Cole created an explosion in the fireplace, as if she had thrown an entire Christmas tree into the hearth. The roaring flames illuminated the room. What they revealed made Charlie wish the dungeon remained in shadow. There was a rough wooden frame crossed in the center. The four corners were bolted with metal shackles. The dark figure stepped up to the X-frame, lovingly caressing the coarse surface. Isn't she a beauty? This is the real thing, by the way, not something the trendy 50 Shades crowd recreated. Cole was lean and muscular, though not particularly tall. Her leather vest fit tightly, showing off her sculpted shoulders and tantalizing biceps. She had no waist to speak of. Her leather pants fit her boyish hips and showcased long, lean thighs. She was quite the butch, lethal and sexy. Cole was a predator through and through, from her commanding voice to the dark glint in her black eyes. Like what you see? Charlie was disgusted with herself for noticing. She held her tongue, not wanting to provoke Cole and end up bound to that frame. Cole stalked to her side, reached out and caressed Charlie's cheek with the back of her hand. When Charlie grasped the offending hand, she was hit with a bolt of electricity. She stepped back while looking around the room for an exit. Now that wasn't very nice, Cole tut-tutted. Each time Charlie stepped back, she prowled closer until Charlie's back was against the gritty black cement wall. Cole gripped Charlie by the chin, forcing her to make eye contact. Touch me in anger again, and I will make you pay. The room returned to darkness, and with a snap of her fingers, Cole returned Charlie to her classroom. Charlie was breathing heavy, the fear and confusion clinging to her skin still damp from the blazing fire. She fumbled in her purse, then drained her water bottle in 3 thirsty gulps. "This can't be real," she said again. Only this time she was trying to convince herself rather than stating a fact. Her white blouse was dirty, as if she had buttoned it with sooty fingers, and there were singe marks on her cuffs. She gathered up her things and selected 3 on the speed dial. "Rachel, meet me at Divine." Charlie's tone was curt, but she couldn't quite hide the quiver in her voice. Rachel laughed. "What? No hello? How are you?" "Rally the troops. I'll stay on the line as promised." "Oh shit. Oh shit is right." Charlie's voice was a bit muffled as she hunted around for her keys and climbed into her car. She heard a bit of commotion on the other end of the line, most likely Rachel packing in a hurry. "I'll be there shortly. I just need to leave a note, canceling office hours." Wonder Twins unite. Charlie tried for humor, but even to her it rang false. Virtual fist bump. "Put me on speaker so you can keep your eyes on the road." "Roger that." Charlie could have walked the 3 blocks to Divine, but for some reason she didn't feel comfortable making the trip on foot. She had always wondered what it would be like to have magical powers like Valkyrie or Faith, to see the world from a different perspective. It seemed so whimsical. Even seeing the spirit child was more fascinating than alarming, but showing up in a dark alternate reality was not her idea of a good time. She parked the car, then rested her head in the steering wheel. The familiar and comforting smell of incense filtered through the windows and into her car. Safe. She felt safe here. Charlie gathered her purse and was halfway to the store door when she remembered to lock her door. She turned around and pointed the key fob at the car and dropped her keys. A black ash version of herself sat behind the wheel. The apparition smiled, winked, then vanished. Charlie was too stunned to move. Rachel put her hands on her shoulders and her hazel eyes dark with concern. "You're shaking. Are you hurt?" Charlie made no response. Her body was limp and lifeless. She could barely stand. The door to Divine opened so fast that the bell struggled to catch up with the furious motion. Faith drew Charlie close to her body, one arm around Charlie's waist. "God, she's freezing. I think she's going into shock. Rachel, help me get her inside." They scuttled past the displays and hooked a right into Valkyrie's office, then helped Charlie onto the couch. Faith only letting go long enough to grab the blanket draped over the back of the couch so that she could settle it around Charlie's shivering form. Faith held her so close that Charlie was nearly in her lap. The cold melted away and Charlie got lost in the smell of warm caramel. "You smell like candy." Faith blushed a delightful shade of pink, a charming contrast to her milky white complexion. It took a few moments for her own words to return to her brain. "Oh my God, Faith, I'm sorry. I don't know where that came from." It was her time to blush, and it was a full-on display from her chest up her neck to the tips of her 2 warm ears. Rachel chuckled. "Just don't bite her." "Well, unless she asks very nicely." "Rachel, behave." Valkyrie's voice was stern, but the sparkle in her eyes betrayed her amusement. Embarrassed, Charlie tried to move away from Faith, but Faith held tight. She had resisted a tad longer and decided to accept the comfort, even though she was growing unbearably warm in the place that had lain long dormant. Reality ricocheted in her body, and she started to shake again. The sight of herself reduced to ashes ignited a fear unlike anything she had ever felt before. Charlie blinked her eyes as she held the tea that Faith had handed her in a death grip. She sat on the edge of the couch, too afraid to relax into the cushions. As if Faith could scent the claustrophobia looming, she loosened her grip enough to give Charlie some space to breathe. Charlie was trying to string her thoughts, but they were a tangled jumble, losing time, time-bending, seeing ghosts, teleporting into a dungeon, being accosted by Cole, and then seeing a burned version of herself was crazy-making. I was not burned in the traditional sense. It was as if I were made from burnt paper or ash. You're covered in soot. Did you touch something? Did someone in the dungeon touch you? Faith unwrapped the blanket looking for burns or any sign of injury. When she came up empty, she sighed with relief. Charlie shrugged off the blanket completely. She was starting to sweat. Cold touched me, but only my face. One moment I was in the dungeon with a snarling dark spirit. The next I was back in my classroom. She took a deep draught of tea. The sweet warmth comforted her, but it couldn't quiet her jangled nerves. Faith smoothed away a lock of her hair that obscured her vision, tucking it tenderly behind her ear. "Thank you," Charlie whispered. "Just my luck. I always wanted to be gifted like Valkyrie and Faith, and instead of getting a cool power, I'm being haunted." Faith rested her hand on Charlie's knee, as if she couldn't bear to not be in contact, or maybe she feared that Charlie would be kidnapped again and planned to go along for the ride. Valkyrie noted the intimacy between them, but chose not to say anything. She was focused on more pressing matters. "I don't think the child spirit is haunting you, Charlie. I have a feeling that she's there to help you. She stood at your bedside protecting you. I think your grandmother sent her." Charlie's eyes widened. Grandma Breyer! Just saying her name brought a pang of pain. She missed her very much. "Why do you think that?" She moved aside some papers and sat on the edge of her desk. She crossed her legs at the ankles and adjusted her skirts around her. She liked to play with time periods nearly as much as Faith. Her full black skirts and muted green corset would have fit in a body saloon if not for the modest white blouse underneath. "When I cast my protection spell, you whispered her name in your sleep. I took it as a sign that she was watching over you. It comforted me enough that I was willing to leave you alone to investigate your garments." A video clip of her clothing bursting into flames hijacked her vision. "You could have been burned." Faith's hand on Charlie's thigh tightened. "You saw it?" It was a statement, not a question. "It was like watching a video of it. I saw Valkyrie pick it up in her hands. Her mouth was moving, but I couldn't hear the sound. Then my shirt started to smoke, and Valkyrie nearly caught fire." Charlie's hands trembled. The motion sloshed hot tea through, though she didn't seem to notice. Faith took the teacup from her and wiped the spilled liquid from her hands. Charlie allowed this, as if Faith taking care of her was both expected and welcome. She was too preoccupied to question the unusual display of intimacy. "Is this the first time you've had a vision, Charlie?" Charlie licked her dry, cracked lips and thought for a moment. "When I was a child, I thought everyone could do it. The little videos would pop out of nowhere." Valkyrie was intrigued. "Did they happen all on their own, or did the visions appear when you were touching something or thinking of someone?" "Not," she rubbed her lower lip back and forth. She did not see Faith track this motion or the way that Faith's ebony eyes grew even darker. Charlie snapped her fingers. "An imaginary friend. She taught me how. We used to do it all the time, but it was make-believe, my imagination. Or at least that's what my mother told me." She pursed her lips. Mother was always making light of those things. Faith's deep melodic voice filled the quiet after Charlie's revelations. "She was jealous of you, Charlie." "That's ridiculous. My mom's every whim was catered to. She had everything she could ever wish for. All but one wish." Charlie's voice was filled with heavy sadness. "That I was more like my identical twin, though I suspect Claire being an only child would have worked for her as well." "Oh, sweetheart," Faith murmured. She took Charlie's hand in hers and used the other to brush the tear that escaped Charlie's honey-blonde lashes. This time, Charlie moved away from the intimacy. She couldn't stand to be touched when she was feeling this raw. Faith seemed to be hurt by the sudden distance, but didn't question it. "I think Faith's onto something. And just in case you're wondering, yes, Charlie's mother is that bad." Rachel said as she sat down beside Charlie to lend her presence, but did not try to touch her. I went to the vineyard to visit Charlie in the summer between junior and senior year. I had gotten my fill of Claire on the occasional visits to Mount Holyoke, but nothing prepared me for Charlie's mother. She would walk into the room and ignore Charlie completely. Yet when Claire walked into the room, it was as if she were God's favorite angel walking on earth. And boy, did Claire know it. Faith, what makes you think she's jealous? Valkyrie asked, as if puzzling on a number of reasons and unable to settle on just one. Faith glanced at Charlie, pained to see the sadness lingering in her eyes. Her mother has no powers, must have skipped a generation. Charlie mulled this over, and even though the evidence regarding her magical abilities was stacking up, she was still skeptical. She was fairly certain the lack of affection was the garden variety, sibling rivalry, and favoritism. Grandma Breyer didn't care for the mother or the way she treated me. It doesn't have to be magic. Grandma just hated the way my mother played favorites. Charlie picked at the ash-stained cuff of her shirt. Can you believe they used to call Claire the pretty one? We're absolutely identical. Grandma always thought that was absurd. Rachel scoffed, then shook her head. Claire used to put on the perfect sister act when she visited Charlie in college. All the girls used to preen and fawn all over her. It was disgusting and bizarre. Charlie agreed with her assessment. Rachel was the only one to see through her. Can you believe Claire actually hit on her while we were dating? She was right in front of me. Charlie shook her head and smiled wickedly at the memory. What Rachel did next was priceless. She pried Claire's hand from around her neck and told her she'd rather lick filthy tire treads than kiss her pinched little mouth. Charlie started laughing and she couldn't stop. She was too slap-happy to hold it together, and Rachel laughed with her. Once they had settled down a bit, Valkyrie pulled them back on topic. I wonder if this darkness has anything to do with your sister. She worried her lower lip with her teeth. Maybe your sister wishes to get rid of you, and Cole is helping. Cole's element seems to be fire, but I can't imagine your sister wants to burn you to be the center of attention. She already has that. Charlie's eyes widened. She can do that? Burn me? I don't think it's that literal. On the other hand, it seems very personal. You've seen a child that looks like you and an ash version of yourself. I've never heard of someone being haunted this way. So much for being sexy and powerful like the chicks from Charmed. I get bewitched. The Silent Hill edition. Valkyrie's smile was grim. The question is, why would they work together, and what does Cole get out of this alliance? Greed, Rachel interjected. Claire is pissed off about the inheritance. She was expecting to get the lion's share, and she got nothing, not 1 penny. What could Claire get from offing me? It's not like she's in my will or anything. There has to be something else that she wants. Charlie was racking her brain. What did Claire want? Faith turned her body so she was facing Charlie. Jealousy. Just like your mother, but she wants more than money. We have to figure out what that is. It could be the key to stopping all this madness. Do you think she got the short end of the paranormal stick? Faith tapped her lower lip as she thought. Charlie had this insane impulse to bite Faith's lip and suck on her finger. She shook her head, trying to rid herself of the image. This was simply not the time for her libido to flare back to life. She was so wrapped up in trying to tamp it down, she missed the first part of Faith's sentence. In college, I think she knew about her powers from the start. Her glamour was a facade that she used to tip the scales, to show you that she was the pretty one, the more desirable twin. I bet it ground her gears when she couldn't seduce Rachel. Rachel chuckled. Understatement. It's possible that as twins, your powers are tied together. Maybe there was more to your inheritance than the necklace in the house, Faith continued. Charlie's eyes crossed comically and Faith laughed. I think we're giving Claire too much credit. She was angry about being cut out of the well, but I doubt she made a deal with Cole. There is no way for her to get her hands on my inheritance, even if she snuffed me out. Claire would still be holding the short end of the stick. Besides, Cole doesn't seem like a team player. But she is a player, Valkyrie interrupted. Unfortunately, this is all speculation. Don't get me wrong. I think you may be onto something. For now, we have to deal with the immediate problem, which is Cole and how we're going to keep Charlie safe. I'm tired of being on the receiving end of all this drama. I spent way too much time of my life passively receiving whatever life threw my way. There has to be something I can do for myself. Charlie stood up. You can help us cleanse your house and put a warding to keep Cole out, but I'm afraid it would keep the spirit child out as well. Charlie interrupted. Lee. Lee? She chose the name. Calling her the spirit child freaks me out a bit. Well, just about everything freaks me out. I figured if Cole the Destroyer has a name, then so should she. Not funny, Rachel ground out. Charlie huffed out a sigh. Probably not, considering. Valkyrie took the dark wood box from the shelf and started to fill it with crystals and an array of candles. This is deadly serious. You knew Cole when you were very young. But then something happened. Cole started that little bonfire before I could figure out what. She closed the lid of the box. I'm going to gather some things from the store. Faith joined Charlie's side as they gathered their things to leave. A waft of warm caramel filled Charlie's senses. It made her mouth water. Charlie, do you remember Cole? Is there anything that felt familiar? Faith asked, her husky voice making Charlie shiver. Charlie looked down at her hands. They were filthy, as if she was digging through ashes in the fireplace. I've been too terrified to get a bead on anything. Maybe that's intentional. She's very angry. She wants to hurt me, but I have no idea why. Fire seems to be the common thread, Faith continued to think out loud. There has to be a reason why she's choosing flame. Are you afraid of fire? Do you remember a big fire when you were a kid? Maybe a house burning down? Charlie shook her head. Actually, I've always loved fire. As a kid, I could stare into the flames for ages. I used to sneak downstairs after Christmas to break a branch from the tree and watch it ignite a roaring blaze. It was gorgeous. Rachel chimed in, her humor somewhat restored. You little pyromaniac, she turned to Faith. I always wondered about that. We used to go camping a lot, and Charlie could never tear her eyes away from the campfire. Faith was quiet for a moment and snapped her fingers. I think Cole is tapping into your powers. The fire belongs to you. I wouldn't be surprised if the only powers Cole has are those that she siphons off of you. I don't think so. The fire, the angry touch, they feel foreign. It isn't the flames that I fear most. It's being trapped and not being able to control my own body. Charlie clapped her hands over her mouth. Shit. Great. What if she's listening? Valkyrie re-entered the room, and even though she was absent from the conversation, it was clear that she heard every word. I would sense her if she was here. I may not have gotten the information that I wanted out of touching your clothes, but I know her energy signature. I get a feeling she doesn't like to play games she can't win. That includes entering my space. We're safe here. She leaned against the doorway, her violet eyes luminous and grave. Unfortunately, her connection to you allows her to access your thoughts. Charlie ran her fingers through her hair and tugged a bit. She knows everything. Even the memories I can't recall? Valkyrie toyed with the carnelian pendant that rested above her heart. I saw her touch your temple to read your thoughts. She seemed frustrated. Maybe whatever is blocking your memories is keeping them safe from her. How do I keep myself safe from her? Purifying my house and setting a warding is all well and good, but she's not anchored to my house. She's tethered to me. Valkyrie grew very still, her violet eyes liquid and hypnotic. It seems you know more about your connection than you originally thought. If she's tethered to you, her endgame might be freedom. As far as I'm concerned, she is free to leave me the fuck alone. I don't want her anywhere near me. Valkyrie reached behind her neck and removed the carnelian necklace she always wore. The teardrop-shaped stone, red stone, was multifaceted and glimmered seductively, as if lit up from fire within. Even with the soft lighting in her office, the silver chain shimmered like a ribbon of silk. Wear this. If you're in danger, hold the pendant and think of me. Even if you're lost in the astral plane, my connection to the stone will be the thread I can follow to find you. I couldn't. You've worn this necklace for as long as I've known you. Even as she said the words, the necklace called to her. She wanted it, even though she was reluctant to claim the treasure. Charlie, you're more precious to me than any object. I want to protect you the best way I can, barring following you around. This is the only way I can be with you when you need me. Charlie walked closer to where Valkyrie was standing and then turned around. She held up her hair so Valkyrie could fasten the clasp. She rested her hand on the stone, still warm from Valkyrie's skin. She was overcome with a sense of well-being. It was a relief to feel calm and centered again, emotions that had been in too short supply as of late. She turned around and pulled her friend into a hug. She smelled like sweet neroli and sandalwood, the scent alone melting away the last of her tension. Thank you. You're most welcome. Valkyrie buttoned up her wool coat, then tidied her desk before picking up the materials for the spell. I've been thinking about this protection spell. I don't think it will affect Lee. We just need to be very clear of what our intentions are, and I think we can ban Cole without locking Lee out. Faith nodded. I agree with you. Lee is a healer and protector. The casting shouldn't affect her. Okay, troops. Let's go over to Charlie's house. Cleansing her house and casting a protection spell may not keep Cole out, but it's a start. Valkyrie held back the curtain and ushered them out of the store. Aye, aye, Captain. Rachel saluted her wife, then followed her into the night. Faith and Charlie were not far behind. And that's the end.
Excellent. Excellent. I truly enjoyed that. I had listened to a couple of things, a couple of your other bedtime stories, and I had heard you say that you had decided to play with some other genres. You didn't want to get stuck in a genre. I think that your fans may disagree with you and may stick you in a genre, if I may say that, because you actually have a very good grasp of the paranormal, and you don't find that a lot. So, yay!
Yay!
Yay.
You know, and Lindsay K. Silva had pretty much said the same thing, that, like, I have a good grasp of the paranormal, and, you know, which is a great compliment from Linda, because she writes, like, the Echo series. And,
yes, my favorite series.
Which is just...
so far.
Exactly, which is phenomenal, and I'll say that she's one of my inspirations. Her Echo series and the empath in it definitely shaped myself when writing about empaths. And when it comes to genre, I'm not necessarily afraid of being pigeonholed into one thing or another, but I've got a very, what I say is like a global sense of myself. Like my first short story, Hard Rock Candy, is I wouldn't say vulgar, but it's very hardline, sexual, intense. There are emotions there, but that's not the point of the interaction between the two. And I wrote it because I want more butch pairings in fiction rather than butch femme. But you know, there are other things that attract me. Like I'm attracted to thrillers and mystery, and I guess the core thing that shows up in all of my writing, because I have 2 works in progress right now, is the circle of friends. Like all my stories, no matter what genre, it's never just about a couple or, you know, whatever their occupations are, or whatever's keeping them apart. The core value, the core of all my stories is friendship.
Right. And I do understand that there will be other things that are going to come around that you're going to want to write about. You know, I have a book coming out, and it's humor, and it's very different from my normal everyday life. That's why it's written under a pseudonym, because it's very, very different from Shelia Powell, Psychic Medium. And it's it can be kind of crass humor.
Mm-hmm.
body humor. We'll put it that way.
Well,
So,
vajazzling and tatas. I've seen your posts on Facebook, and I'm intrigued.
you're going, oh my heavens, what in the world is wrong with this woman?
No, it's more like I like her.
Right. And it's so much, if some of my clients read it, they would probably go, oh my gosh, what in the world is wrong with her? But, I know that down the road, I'm really drawn to young adult, because that's the group that I worked with. Mm-hmm. And so down the road, I do feel myself going into some of that as well. So I know that you don't only have to write paranormal, but I think that after this, well, I know it's out now, but after your immediate fan base develops, I think that they'll kind of pigeonhole you for a while. So you might want to just hold on and go along for the ride. But look at Linda Kay. She writes, 1,200 different genres?
Well, actually, when you mention YA, young adult, it actually pings me because when I started writing, I started several different manuscripts. And one of the things that's on my shelf but shall be picked up again is a young adult title. And I think no matter what I'm writing, I'm drawing from things in my life.
Absolutely.
And I had a very close best friend in high school, Cindy, and we had this amazing connection, and it was never sexual. And when I first came out to myself, she and I had so much in common. We're both Sagittarians. We're both the year of the dragon. We oddly, even when we don't see each other and hadn't seen each other for years, we lived parallel lives. Like, we met somebody in the first week of college, and there's just a lot of parallels. And I decided to kind of play with that. But in the case of Dreamcatcher, I wanted them to actually, like, one of them knew that they loved their friends but would never ruin the friendship there. And then there's this scary thing that happens, and then the other girl's like, I can't lose you, and like kisses her.
Right.
Spoiler.
Yeah.
But no, I mean that, like, I have things on my shelf, but all of them, like, I think of myself, like, I don't know, if you, well, I feel like I take up a lot of space, and so there's a lot of surface area of ideas and creativity, which is not about not pigeonholing myself, but more like letting a different part of myself shine. Does that make sense?
Right. Absolutely. It's like with the book of mine that's coming out. I knew I had to do that first, because it just kept coming back. I would work on 5 other things, and then that one would come back, and work on the other things, and that would come back. Mm-hmm. Probably just exactly like yours did with you. Mm-hmm. It just kept coming back, so you knew it had to come first. That's your baby. You've got to give birth to that first. And once I do, then all these other things are open, and I'm excited to see what you do next. Do you have anything in mind?
Yeah, I do. I've written the first 2 chapters of Mirror's Edge, which is the sequel to If I Die Before I Wake. Okay, so we're going paranormal again? Yes.
Good.
We're going, this time it's going to be paranormal thriller murder mystery. And what I've done is in my editing, I pulled out the infidelity angle. Mm-hmm. I pulled it out completely. From, like, I decided instead of Charlie's wife leaving her for a younger woman, she passed before the book started, and I decided I didn't want the infidelity that happened a little later on. So that's how I lost like half of my novel in February, and then I started from the start. But the person that I cut out, Detective Eva Stonegate, is a great character, and I love her. I love her family, and I decided instead of messing with her family life that she could not have something bad happen, and that her come into play. So she's in the first scene, and it, I'm excited because they were in an autopsy, and the coroner is saying, this is just, are you sure that he's only been dead for 2 hours? And she's like, why you say that? Because his ice, there are crystals in his blood, like as if he was frozen and kept in another place.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're like, no, he was in his class at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's August, and it's 100 degrees, and there's no air conditioning in the dormitories, so that couldn't possibly happen. So now I know that my killer can breathe ice and cold, but that's as far as I know at this point.
That's cool.
Yeah,
I like that. Great.
So I have that, and I have which is Mirror's Edge, and I have Words Left Unspoken, and that one is also very special to me. So it's a traditional romance. There's no paranormal in it, but there's a lot of Lizzie in it, and anytime you read something written by me, there's a lot of me in it.
Right.
Yeah.
That is the hardest for me to write, believe it or not. Traditional romance.
Mm-hmm.
Can't do it. Just can't. So I applaud you for that one. I don't know why I can't do that. So, and I have to ask you, I kind of kept getting the feeling you were going to touch on some S&M.
Do you know what's really funny is, all right, so the old plot line, Eva is trying to save Charlie, and Eva's been sucked into dreams herself, where she's done things that are out of character, including beating up a suspect, which is, she's so straight-laced, it's not something she would ever do.
Right.
And so they were both determined not to be pulled into their baser instinct for violence against people who've wronged them. Unfortunately, the final sin is not aggression, it's sex.
Right.
So there's a very I missed the action sequence, but I might be able to put it in another book, so I'm not going to describe it. Other than, Eva was pretty sure that, like, Charlie was drowning, and she was pretty sure she wasn't going to be able to get to Charlie, and she just saved her, and she's coughing up water, and she's so relieved that she's alive that she kisses her. And then instead of being where they were, they get put in Charlie's bedroom, and Charlie's no longer injured, and they have this really intense dominant and submissive sex scene.
Okay.
Where Eva, who's a consummate top, who's like 6 foot tall, and Charlie, as you know, is 5'2".
Yeah.
Really, really tops her, and it's like the sex scene. The sex scene is like 2 chapters long, and one of the difficulties I'm in right now, because I'm not ready to really dig into the book and writing the new book until my life calms, and that might be next week. So I'm trying to figure out, should Eva be single, and then I can use this really hot S&M scene, or do I keep her married? Because this is not the sex that she would have with her wife. It's definitely something else. So I'm like, should I have like romance intrigue or not? And, I figure what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my writing blitzes. Whatever comes out, comes out. And, like the story will...
I kept feeling that S&M scene.
It is hot. And I guarantee you've never seen a butch treated that way before.
I kept feeling that. And I was like, yeah. I keep feeling that, so warm that one up.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that, if I toot my own horn, I have a talent for coming up with non-traditional or unusual takes. Like this particular novel, If I Die Before I Wake, has a lot of twists and turns, and I bet your bottom dollar most people have no clue where it's going, and when they get to the next turn, they're like, whoa. This is not what I was predicting. And so the same thing is true with the erotica I write, or the erotic scenes that I write, is that, I tend to break new ground, or not that things that happen in my book haven't happened to real people, but that I don't see it a lot in fiction, and that's the difference.
And that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good thing. Somebody needs to be there to break that ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really glad that you are. Anything else you'd like to fit in tonight? And by the way, Grandma Clara, again, so proud.
Oh.
Just so proud. She's gone now. Mm-hmm. She actually stayed with me for the reading of the story.
Uh-huh.
And I have to tell you this, I'm glad she's gone. Didn't want her to spend the night with me. Because they will if I don't talk for them and let you know what's going on, they'll stay with me.
It's like Whoopi Goldberg in Ghost.
Yes.
Molly, really you in danger, girl.
I'm serious, and it's like she just sit here very politely all day while I did my work, and I'm writing, and I'm thinking, I really don't want to write this with you watching. Because I was writing some, things in mind too, and it's like, I'm embarrassed. Would you go over there and see?
That's so. I love that Grandma Clara was. She's, if you're gonna have a ghost spend the day with you, she's a good ghost to have.
She was a sweetheart. She didn't bother me, but she wanted you to know exactly how proud she was.
One of the tensions and when, I was 8, but I was always older than my age, yeah. And one of the things that made me sad is that I wanted her to be there for my wedding, and I wanted her to be there for so many things. And one of the beautiful things about her passing is I have her with me more than Absolutely. If she were alive.
Absolutely. Because she just whispered in my ear that she was there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she was there.
Yeah, I know. I feel her with me. I know my gifts and my mm-hmm. mother's gifts and whatnot, and so I don't have to suspend belief in the way
Absolutely not.
Yeah. No, my mom's a conjurer. She will think something and it happens. Like,
yeah.
She doesn't tell anybody. It's, and here's the proof in the pudding. It's like she doesn't tell anybody. She's not a big talker. She doesn't tell anybody what she wants. We just end up doing it somehow. Yeah. Like, off the cuff, my partner and I decided to go across the street and have dinner at David Anthony's. And we had our appetizer with lobster in it, but I knew I wasn't going to finish it, but I knew my mom was at home and she loves lobster, so I could just cross the street and brought it to my mother. And she goes, I was wishing for lobster.
Yep.
And that happens all the time. Like, my partner would walk our husky dog and go to Dunkin' Donuts and get an iced coffee in a flavor that she never drinks. I was hoping for some coffee. And when she visited me in Ireland, because I went to my junior abroad in Ireland, and it didn't rain for 2 weeks. She is Camelot.
I had my aunts who actually were the ones that really helped me uncover all my gifts, and one of them was absolutely amazing at getting anything she wanted.
Because my mom's very, she's very loving, kind, and giving. Mm-hmm. And she's never manipulative.
Right.
So
just knows how to get what she wants.
Exactly. It's
nothing
just
wrong with that.
Yeah, it's just like a casual. She's never been power hungry. She's never manipulated anybody or made them feel bad or forced them to do things that they don't want to do. But she's just. That's why it's like she's world famous in Hoboken when she was a nursery school teacher, because people thought that she walked on water in a lot of ways. Yeah. She did with the the young kids. She just had gift with them, and so I'm like, yeah. So she's a conjurer, and I'm an empath.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you got the raw end of that deal, because I tell everybody that is my greatest gift and my worst curse.
Mm-hmm.
Because being an empath, for those that don't know, is probably the hardest gift that you can have.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to take on other people's feelings, thoughts, emotions, illness.
Especially when you're tired. Like this week, minorly but majorly after Superstorm Sandy, I was so stripped bare that I couldn't tolerate anything. And luckily, a good friend of mine lived near the DC area, and like it had only been 2 days after we'd been rescued from the storm, because we stayed here during the storm. And I was like, this is making me crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, you want to come? I was like, yeah. So I spent like 5 nights with her and her family. And then when I came back, magically one of my mom's former co-worker needed a house sitter. And so we offered to do it. And my partner didn't stay because she called it Amish, because there was no TV. And she wanted to have TV and cable, and my mom's friend, I guess, watches things on her computer, but usually is not a TV person. But for me, being there for like, I think it was more than 2 weeks, it was quiet. There,
Mm-hmm.
like, that's what I need. Like when I'm stressed out or worn thin, I need to be
Yep.
alone. Because I can't filter out emotion. So anything anybody is feeling when I'm feeling thin, like
Mm-hmm. You
I
feel it too.
yeah. So I was like, I can't do that, and it literally makes me crazy. So I was like, I have to stop the world. That's one thing that I think has kept me on the path that I am now, is I
Mm-hmm.
know when I need to back up.
Yeah, and I tend to forget when I need to back up. I was telling you that before we started that I ended up in the hospital because I don't always watch myself.
Mm-hmm.
And empaths can do that if they're not careful.
Exactly. And I'm very, obviously, my job, my job is as a host, and, I do a lot of things, that are public and very social, and there's a part of me that loves that, but like I am like a combination between the hermit and the I don't know, attention getting, energy loving social being. So I can either
Mm-hmm.
be that person who's most loves to be around strangers, loves to be around people to get away.
Yes, I'm very much that way. And yeah, very
Yeah.
much that way. And it's hard when you do what we do for a living
Mm-hmm.
to go from one to the other.
And
So
sometimes you don't have a choice, so you have to kind of figure out how to breathe here and there.
yeah, absolutely. Well, dear.
I know. I was just about to say, I was like, I think we need to close this interview.
Yeah.
But thank you, everybody, for listening into our conversation and for listening to me do a reading from my novel. And
I have so enjoyed listening to you read If I Die Before I Wake. And thank you for inviting me to host your show and to hop on your bed and play with you. And and I can't wait to meet you in Portland.
oh, it's going to be fantastic.